The annual Harrington family dinner in 2023 was always an exercise in quiet endurance. But this year felt different. I was 33 now, no longer the fresh-faced dreamer they'd once dismissed. As I stepped into my parents' Seattle waterfront estate, the familiar scent of cedar and expensive wine wrapped around me like an old, unwelcome coat. "Oh, look who finally decided to grace us." My older brother Ethan's voice rang out from across the foyer, smooth and mocking. "How's that little renewable energy project of yours, Lena? Still pretending to save the planet?" I smoothed the hem of my navy silk dress, Prada, though I knew they'd never recognize it, and smiled faintly, picturing the signed acquisition papers sitting in my real office. Papers that would make tomorrow unforgettable. "Still running, Ethan, thanks for asking." The living room glittered with over-polished success. My sister-in-law Camille dripping in gemstones. My parents glowing with pride over their accomplished son. And a chorus of relatives eager to trade resumes. Ethan, of course, held court by the fireplace, champagne in hand. "You know," he began, relishing his audience, "Harrington Energy just hit another record quarter. We're expanding into 2 new countries." He glanced at me with a smirk. "But I'm sure your, what is it? Climate consulting is doing fine, too." If only he knew. His record quarter was already circling the drain. Those expansion plans? Dead before they began. Harrington Energy's future now sat in my hands. Lena Carson, founder of Solace Dynamics, the company that had quietly bought up their debt for the past year. My mother touched my arm, her diamond bracelet flashing under the chandelier. "We're just concerned for you, darling. After all these years with that little business, maybe it's time to think about something more secure. Ethan could always find you a position." I thought of my little business, now valued at nearly $500 million, and of the meeting scheduled tomorrow morning where I would take control of Harrington Energy. "Actually, Mom," I said, taking a slow sip of champagne, "business is going exceptionally well." Camille gave a thin laugh. "Please. Our driver's niece saw you working late in that cramped office downtown. So sad." That cramped office was merely a decoy. My real headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of the Rainier Tower, complete with a private sky lounge. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. Dinner rolled on as usual, Ethan basking in his own stories, each more inflated than the last. "We're about to close the biggest deal in our history," he bragged. "Once we acquire Pacific Renewables, we'll be untouchable." I hid my smile behind my wine glass. Pacific Renewables had already turned down Ethan's bid in favor of a much better offer from my company, though he wouldn't find that out until tomorrow. "Speaking of business," my father said, his voice lined with that familiar note of disapproval, "your brother tells me your little startup is trying to compete in the renewable energy infrastructure market. Isn't that a bit ambitious for your resources?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. The name on the screen, Sarah, my chief of staff. She knew better than to interrupt family dinner unless it was urgent. Everyone's eyes followed me as I rose from the table. "Miss Carson," Sarah's voice was crisp and efficient. "The board has approved the full executive restructuring of Harrington Energy. We're ready to execute tomorrow morning. Do you want to confirm the entire list?" I glanced back into the dining room. My family seated in their cocoon of assumed superiority. Ethan still holding court with his champagne. Camille idly displaying a diamond bracelet worth more than they imagined I earned in a year. "Yes," I said, my voice deliberately carrying across the room. "Approve all of them." "Even your brother?" Sarah asked. I locked eyes with Ethan, watching his smug expression falter. Especially my brother. The silence that followed was almost theatrical. Camille's fork clinked against her plate. My mother's hand flew to her throat. And Ethan? His face drained of all color. "Lena," he stammered, his voice suddenly unsure, "what are you talking about? What layoffs?" I stepped back into the room, every eye on me. "Oh, didn't you know?" I asked lightly, letting years of his condescension sharpen my smile. Solace Dynamics now holds controlling interest in Harrington Energy. As of tomorrow morning, we're restructuring the entire company. That's impossible, he snapped. You don't have the resources. I unlocked my phone, opening my portfolio app and tilting the screen toward him. Actually, brother dear, I have more than enough resources. Care to see the numbers? The room erupted. My father barking for explanations, my mother's voice cracking into sobs, Camille's polished composure dissolving. But Ethan just sat there, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at my true office, the top 3 floors of the Rainier Tower, which I also happened to own, its glass walls offering a perfect view of the Harrington Energy headquarters across the street. By the end of the day, everyone inside that building would know exactly what my little startup was capable of. I could already picture the chaos spiraling across the city. Sarah met me in my private elevator, tablet in hand. The news has broken, she reported. Harrington Energy's stock is down 40% in pre-market trading. Ethan's been trying to reach you since 6 a.m., 47 missed calls. I stepped into my office, the curved desk of rare African blackwood gleaming under the morning light. It was worth more than Ethan's annual bonus. And the board meeting? I asked. 9 a.m. sharp. All members confirmed attendance, except your brother. Security says he's having what they describe as a significant emotional event in his office. I opened my laptop. The headlines were exactly as I'd anticipated. Energy giant Harrington taken over in surprise acquisition. Unknown firm Solace Dynamics unveils $4.2 billion renewable empire. Sibling shock, family feud rocks clean energy industry. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Camille dripping with forced warmth. Lena, darling, clearly there's been a misunderstanding. We should talk about this, as a family. Another message followed from my mother. How could you do this to your brother, after all he's done for you? I thought about all he'd done, the clients he'd stolen, the contracts he'd sabotaged, the endless belittling of my ambitions. Every slight had been fuel. Sarah's voice came through the intercom. Your parents are in the lobby, demanding to see you, and your brothers, she hesitated, making quite a scene at Harrington headquarters. I turned to the wall of security monitors. Sure enough, Ethan was in his soon-to-be former office, sweeping files and awards off his desk in a fury. Let him have his moment, I said. As for my parents, send them up. It's time for a proper family meeting. The door burst open moments later. My mother, usually immaculate, looked rattled, her silk suit slightly askew. My father's face was flushed an alarming shade of red. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, then stopped cold, taking in my office. The panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, the understated luxury, the quiet hum of power. It all told a story he'd never imagined me living. Welcome to Solace Dynamics, I said, gesturing toward the 2 chairs across from my desk. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. You've destroyed your brother's company, his reputation, my mother cried. No, I corrected, calm and steady. I saved his company from his mismanagement. Harrington Energy was 3 months from bankruptcy. You'd have known that if you'd looked past Ethan's bragging and checked the numbers. I swiveled my monitor toward them, the financial reports glowing on the screen. Their eyes widened as the truth finally began to take shape. And if you think this family reckoning is over, you're wrong. What happens in the boardroom next will change everything. Subscribe now so you don't miss the moment Ethan walks in. 18 failed project bids. 32 million in unauthorized expenses. A workplace harassment settlement quietly buried under miscellaneous legal costs. Would you like me to go on? I asked, my tone even but cutting. My father, ever the negotiator, shifted tactics. Sweetheart, if you wanted a larger role in the company, we could have discussed it. There was no need for such aggressive measures. Aggressive measures? I let out a sharp laugh. You mean like when Ethan sabotaged my first major contract? Or when he whispered to potential investors that Solace Dynamics was unstable? Those kinds of measures? The door burst open before he could respond. Ethan stormed in, 2 security guards trailing behind. You can't do this to me, he shouted. I built that company. Actually, I pressed a button on my desk, and the wall display lit up with a detailed map of shell companies, holding firms, and acquisition timelines. You nearly destroyed it. I've spent the last year quietly buying your debt, rescuing your failing projects, and preparing for this moment. I stood, and instinctively, they all stepped back. Solace Dynamics isn't just a small consulting firm anymore. We're a $4.2 billion clean energy empire. And Harrington Energy? I tilted my head toward him. That's just our latest acquisition. Ethan's voice cracked. What do you want? Money? A position? Name your price. I thought of the countless times he'd offered me an entry-level role at his firm with a smug smile. I want you to know what it feels like to have everything you've built taken by someone you underestimated. But unlike you, I won't burn down what I've acquired. I reached for a folder and slid it across the desk. Junior Project Manager, reporting directly to my VP of Operations. Same offer applies to your remaining executives, those who qualify. I turned to Camille. And I'm afraid your title of Chief of Social Media won't exist under the new structure. The silence was absolute. My mother collapsed into the nearest chair, her veneer of superiority gone. My father stared out at the Seattle skyline, perhaps seeing for the first time the empire his daughter had built without his blessing. And Ethan? Ethan stood frozen, clutching his new contract, finally grasping that his little sister had outplayed him completely. Now, I said, settling back into my chair, shall we discuss the future of Harrington Energy, or would you prefer to start clearing out your offices? The weeks that followed were a master class in corporate transformation, and in teaching my family exactly who they'd been underestimating all these years. I watched from my corner office in the Rainier Tower as Harrington Energy underwent its metamorphosis, not just in structure, but in culture. Ethan, surprisingly, accepted the junior position. His first day was unforgettable. He arrived in his usual tailored Armani suit, only to be shown to a modest cubicle wedged between two engineers he'd never bothered to acknowledge when he was CEO. Your morning coffee, Mr. Harrington, his former executive assistant quipped as she passed his desk. My latte in hand. The irony was thick enough to taste. Camille tried a different tactic. She breezed into my office, uninvited, dressed in what she clearly thought was business casual, a cream Gucci sheath dress that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage. Lena, darling, she purred, surely we can work something out. I have excellent connections in the social circuit. Like the connections you use to spread rumors about Solace Dynamics' unstable future? I cut in, turning my monitor to show screenshots of her posts and thinly veiled jabs from her so-called society friends. Those connections? She left in tears, her Louboutins tapping a sharp staccato across the marble lobby. My parents were the slowest to adjust. First came the guilt. How could you humiliate your brother like this? We raised you better. Then bargaining. Surely we can keep this in the family. Your father could advise on the restructuring. Finally, acceptance. Though not without a twist. A month after the takeover, during our first official board meeting, my father cleared his throat. I may have underestimated you, Lena. The boardroom went still. In 33 years, I had never once heard him admit a miscalculation. When you started your company, he went on, I thought you were being stubborn, refusing to follow the path we'd prepared for you. He glanced at the quarterly reports glowing on the screen. Solace Dynamics' growth curve nothing short of spectacular. Now I see you weren't following a path. You were blazing one. I let the moment breathe before answering. Thank you, Dad. But this was never about proving you wrong. It was about proving myself right. The transformation exceeded even the market's highest expectations. We cut waste, invested in genuine innovation instead of Ethan's vanity projects, and built a culture where merit, not bloodline, determined advancement. To my surprise, Ethan began to thrive. Stripped of his title and privileges, he learned the business from the ground up. 6 months in, he actually earned, his first promotion. I never really knew what our developers did, he admitted during a review. I just took credit for their work. And now? I asked, genuinely curious. Now I know we had it all wrong, Ethan admitted one afternoon in the project room. Success isn't about looking powerful, it's about building something meaningful. Camille eventually found her own path, though not within the company. Last I heard, she'd launched a modest fashion blog, ironically finding her following by being authentic rather than posturing for prestige. The final chapter of our family's transformation came during the annual Harrington family dinner, exactly 1 year after the takeover. Same waterfront mansion, same dining room, but the atmosphere was completely different. Solus Dynamics had just closed another record quarter. "My daughter," my father announced proudly, lifting his glass, "would you like to tell us about the new AI initiative?" I looked around the table. Ethan, in a more grounded role, gave me a genuine nod. My mother regarded me not as the daughter in need of guidance, but as a peer she respected. Relatives who once mocked my little clean energy project now leaned forward, eager for my words. I rose. "I'd like to propose a toast. To family. Not the kind that demands conformity, but the kind that grows stronger through challenge. To success, not measured by appearances, but by impact. And to small beginnings, because sometimes the largest empires start as tiny ideas nobody believes in." The room broke into genuine applause, a far cry from the polite tolerance of a year ago. Later, as I made my way to my modest hybrid in the driveway, Ethan joined me. "You know what's funny?" he said, eyeing the car. "All those years, we thought success looked like sports cars and corner offices. But you built an empire driving a Toyota." I smiled, unlocking the door. "That's because I knew something you didn't. Real success isn't about showing off what you have. It's about building something so solid you don't have to." I drove back to my penthouse, the one indulgence I'd finally allowed myself, and thought about the journey. From the mocked startup to the industry leader that reshaped not just a company, but a family. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying what others built, it's building something better yourself. And sometimes the smallest beginnings lead to the biggest transformations, especially when no one sees them coming. The next morning, Sarah stepped into my office with a thick envelope. "This came for you." Inside was my old business plan, the one Ethan had torn in half at a family dinner years ago. A note from my mother was clipped to it. "I found this while cleaning. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. You didn't just build a company, Lena. You built a legacy. One that will outlast all our foolish pride. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. Love, Mom." I pinned the tattered pages on my wall beneath our first company logo, where the sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows hit each morning. It reminded me daily that success stories rarely start with privilege. More often they start when someone believes in themselves, when no one else will. Last week, a young entrepreneur pitched me her renewable tech startup. Her hands trembled as she admitted she had no Ivy League degree, no wealthy backers, just a sharp idea and relentless determination. I invested, not despite her humble beginnings, but because of them. After all, every empire starts somewhere, even if it's just a small, overlooked idea that nobody believes in. At first, I fought for every step of this journey, often without a single person believing in me. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts below and let's talk. And remember, never let someone else's doubt define your limits. Build your own path, even if it starts small, because the world's biggest changes often begin quietly.